business is booming so much in Texas, we now have our own exchange-traded fund. It's a basket of stocks of only Texas companies. A stock exchange in Texas has long been a vision of mine. Today's announcement is the next logical step in the trajectory of business in Texas. The Texas Stock Exchange will ensure that businesses have access to capital and that market participants have more choices. Texas is the modern embodiment of the American dream, where everyone has the opportunity to succeed. And the Texas Stock Exchange will ensure more businesses have that opportunity.
A strike by the International Longshoremen's Association is set to hit ports on the U.S. East Coast and Gulf of Mexico tomorrow. Join us now to discuss the potential disruption to the country's supply chains. David Kiesling, Vice President of Transportation Management at Kenco Group. This is, you expect this to happen, I guess, David, at this point? It's going to be tough to avert.
Yes, I don't think that there's been anything in the last 24 hours that says that either side is ready to negotiate. And I think, at the end of the day today, we'll see some activity tomorrow morning.
What's the total percentage of goods that are covered by the ports that are going to see strikers across the U.S.? I mean, can the slack be taken up by other ports?
Well, I think one of the things that we've seen, and, we are really focused on some leading and some lagging indicators, right, is that volume has already shifted to the West Coast. And our lead indicators are showing that over the last 4 or 5 weeks, we've seen container volume and vessel volume be similar to that of the peak in 2021 and 2022, which is almost 20,000 TEUs daily that have been handled by the West Coast ports. But historically, about 45% of the volume that is imported in the United States comes through, ports that would be affected by a work stoppage along the East Coast.
Is that one of the downsides for the ports affected? That does any of that shift become permanent, and does that taken into the calculus of the strikers?
I think that's an interesting thing, right? When you look at the industries that are affected, clearly automotive industry is affected, automotive assembly components in particular, right? There's apparel that has been affected. The whole Panama Canal was, widened and deepened so that these large ships could get from, the far west to the East Coast to, eliminate that leg of internal movement inside of the United States or through the United States. So, automotive apparel and lastly, pharmaceutical and, the normal actions that are taken for the automotive assembly plants because we moved to a global just-in-time, production model is that they may air freight in the short term. They may also pull forward some of those scheduled shutdowns. Obviously, from an apparel standpoint, it's more specialty retail rather than general merchandise like T-shirts, socks and underwear, right? And then pharmaceuticals, there's a big impact there because we need to monitor closely how that might impact patient care. But also, let's not forget about exports. Specifically pork and beef. Our ranchers here in the United States, they rely heavily on consistent volume of vessels being available to load for export.
I can see how some of this would be both inflationary and deflationary if you're not exporting, just depending on what's more affected.
Correct. And, if you've read anything lately, everybody's talking about the price of bananas, right? In particular, that's clearly an import. But there could be some deflation as it relates to supply and availability of some, items, including pork and beef that may not be exported like they normally are today. You also said, what's the long-term impact? And I think, what we've learned from COVID is that, nearshoring continues to be an option. I think moving manufacturing, internally domestic to the United States obviously becomes an option as well. And I think what we've seen is, there's significantly less friction and complexity from a trade compliance standpoint when we move to Mexico or Central America, when goods continue to be manufactured outside of the U.S., but then ended up consumed, here inside.
Broader economic conditions also set the table for further disinflation. The labor market is now roughly in balance. Longer-run inflation expectations remain well anchored. Turning to monetary policy. Over the past year, we have continued to see solid growth and healthy gains in the labor force and in productivity. Our goal all along has been to restore price stability without the kind of painful rise in unemployment that has frequently accompanied efforts to bring down high inflation. That would be a highly desirable result for the communities, families, and businesses we serve. While that task is not complete, we have made a good deal of progress toward that outcome. For much of the past 3 years, inflation ran well above our goal, and the labor market was extremely tight. Appropriately, our focus was on bringing down inflation. By keeping monetary policy restrictive, we helped restore the balance between overall supply and demand in the economy. That patient approach has paid dividends. Inflation is now much closer to our 2% objective. Today, we see the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals as roughly in balance. Our policy rate had been at a 2-decade high since the July 2023 meeting. At the time of that meeting, core inflation was 4.2%, well above our target, and unemployment was 3.5%, near a 50-year low. In the 14 months since the July 2023 meeting, inflation has moved down and unemployment has moved up, in both cases significantly. It was time for a recalibration of our policy stance to reflect progress toward our goals, as well as the changed balance of risks. As I mentioned, our decision to reduce our policy rate by 50 basis points reflects our growing confidence that with an appropriate recalibration of our policy stance, strength in the labor market can be maintained in a context of moderate economic growth and inflation moving down sustainably to 2%. Looking forward, if the economy evolves broadly as expected, policy will move over time toward a more neutral stance. But we are not on any preset course. The risks are two-sided, and we will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting. As we consider additional policy adjustments, we will carefully assess incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. Overall, the economy is in solid shape. We intend to use our tools to keep it there.
Welcome to the Crypto Teacher. And you know I come back with that video just to make you think.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
And make sure you join the Patrons. If you're not a part of the Patrons, make sure you're hitting the Cash App. And make sure that you go like and follow the TikTok. More videos to come. I have plenty of TikTok videos, but just haven't uploaded them. Now we have Texas gets its own exchange. And remember, guys, this would make no sense whatsoever unless you knew about tokenization. And tokenization will allow small markets to thrive. And that's the reason why we saw all these big corporations moving to Texas, not just less taxes. Tokenization will allow you to raise more capital. And remember, the Crypto Teacher told you. Now we have the port strike. Looks like it's going to happen. They were offered 50%, I think, over 6 years. And we know Biden could have stopped it. And then also Kamala definitely could have stepped in. She's running for president. But, of course, this is all a movie. And if it does happen, guys, we know why. They're ready to automate everything anyway. We know how important blockchain is. We're still in that testing phase of building this fourth industrial revolution. And they'll be able to test these reroutes if it closes. Remember, guys, this is a plan. It moves in phases. But again, they want to automate a lot of these port jobs anyway and replace them with machines. And we had Jerome in the house, and he said exactly what we thought he would say. The economy is doing well. Job market is good. We'll lower rates if we have to. But then he also said something that he hasn't said before, and that's how we know something is up. He stated most likely they'll have 50 basis point cut by 2024. And we know he never says anything like that. We have the drums are beating. We have this port crisis, other strikes. So we know for a fact if this port strike happens and the drums keep getting louder, he'll be able to cut even more. And remember, the crypto teacher told you. And speaking of blockchain, we have voting on the phone. And we know in 2028, voting is definitely going to be on the phone, and it'll be on blockchain to record that it is authentic. But CNBC talking about the boogeymen hacking your phone. It's always the same boogeyman. But this is nothing but the Hegelian dialectic in order to move over to this digital economy. And we see these storms keep getting worse and worse. And we have an asteroid that just came next to the moon. They're calling it 2 moons, and it's going to be in that gravitational pull, but we really don't know what's going on. We know NASA means deception. And what did Yeshua tell his disciples? Don't be deceived. But with these storms, we have insurance companies acting like they don't have the money. And guys, we know we pay insurance companies just in case something happens. If nothing happens, we get nothing back. And they can easily set up a system like they have in Social Security just in case you need it. And then on top of it, we're giving other countries billions and billions of dollars. I think there was a report out that we could have gave every soldier $2 million for the amount of money that we've given countries for no reason. And that's just over the last few years. And remember, the crypto teacher told you, because he knows when it comes to the NWO, it's all planned out. You have a wonderful day.
Joining us right now is Tusk Ventures CEO Bradley Tusk. His new book, Vote with Your Phone, Why Mobile Voting is Our Final Shot at Saving Democracy. It is out now.
It is.
It's a provocative idea. A lot of people have been talking for a very long time about how this could one day be the way we do this. Of course, this and has also been one of the great worries about whether people would believe in the democracy and whether they'd believe in the vote. So what say you?
So I would say this. I think we would all agree that politicians basically make decisions based on the next election, right? It's fair to say. And we would agree that because of gerrymandering, basically primaries are the election that really matters. And just as a fact, primary turnout's about 10 to 15%. So who is that? It's the far left, it's the far right, or it's big special interests, whether it's the NRA or teachers unions or whoever. And they dictate not only who wins our elections, but then ultimately what those people do once they're in office, because all they want to do is make sure they win the next primary, which means keep the base happy and keep the special interests happy. And so we're always going to be in a world where either we have the total dysfunction and chaos of D.C. or totally one-sided government, whether it's state of Texas on the right or city of San Francisco on the left. And the only solution is you got to change the underlying incentives and inputs and significantly increase turnout to move politicians to the middle.
Okay, so but the question is with Russia and Iran and China apparently all very interested in the outcome of our election and willing to do things that are completely and utterly untoward. How much would you worry that we would all be voting here, and so the great news is everybody's voting, but then all of a sudden, even if the Iranians or the Chinese or the Russians don't really get in, but the speculation gets out there that they have, that people don't believe in the vote, which is what we have even right now.
I was about to say, first of all, I'm not sure that we could be much worse than the status quo. But even putting that aside, a few things. One is, so we've been building technology according to the recommendation of the U.S. Vote Foundation that is end-to-end encrypted, end-to-end verifiable, multi-factor authentication, biometric screening, open source, it's air-gapped, and this is all philanthropic. I've paid for this all myself out of my foundation. We're going to make it free and open source to anyone who wants to use it. So number one, I would argue it's far more secure than the existing voting technologies where mail trucks get lost and polling places get shut down and things like that. But beyond that, my argument is let's start small. School board elections, city council elections. I'm pretty sure Vladimir Putin is not that interested in the Queensboro president election.
Only because I've got like 15 mobile devices.
Yeah, so here's how it works. So you would, let's just use New York City because we're sitting here. You download the app from the New York City Board of Elections. And the first thing they would say, okay, is Becky a registered voter in New York City? You determine that. Then is Becky really Becky? So there's multi-factor authentication like you would get from Google or Amazon or anyone else.
Which I have to show my driver's license or what?
Well, first thing is you just have to be able to show that you're even from your device, which is why, just in the way that any website will text you a number, then it could be driver's license, it could be biometric screening, fingerprints, iris, a lot like Clear at the airport. To determine you're Becky.
So more than if I even showed up at a polling.
Yeah.
And this goes back to then the whole idea that people don't want to ID anybody.
Well, you're going to have to make some choices between having an app that people have confidence in to get more turnout and rules around that. I absolutely agree. I certainly prefer that we use biometric screening because then we know that you're you. The ballot pops up on screen. You make all your choices. Because it's digital, we don't have to worry about hanging chads or stray
I'm
pencil
cool with
marks.
that, but I don't want you to have my biometrics.
Well, you don't have to vote this way.
Yeah,
So
I would
look,
go into the
you don't use Clear at the airport or TSA or any of that
I'd
stuff.
rather go.
You just wait in the really long line.
No, I fly often enough that I only fly United, and I'm 1K there. So.
Okay, fine. So look, there's a lot of people, like for example, I dropped my daughter off at college about a month ago.
Yeah.
She's never going to do absentee ballots. She's never going to go somewhere. She has checked her, assuming she were awake right now, which I'm sure she's not, but if she were, she will have already checked her phone 5 times.
But would you
since we
worry
started
about
talking.
biometrics getting hacked at some point?
No, because you're using biometrics to get into your phone all day, every day. It's the same thing. You might not be, but the vast majority of people are. And to the point, let's meet people where they are. If younger people or people deployed military or people with disabilities for whom voting is difficult want to be able to vote on their phone, let's let them do it. For you,
there's going to be an argument.
Thank you. It was more on the recovery efforts from Helene, former FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate. Right now, what are the most important things that we should be doing, Craig?
Well, right now it's still a response, and I think that's, it's hard for people to start talking about recovery when you still haven't even gotten to some areas. But all of this is going to be based upon getting in, as the mayor pointed out, you got to get that critical infrastructure up, particularly that water system. You can ship a lot of water in, but until that system's up, it's hard to get to the next steps. The other key thing is, if you're not part of an organization, I think the governor and everybody else would tell you, just give them time. Don't try to get in there. Give generously to those organizations, as they pointed out, North Carolina Recovery. Money's your best way to help right now. And if you aren't able to make contact with family, there's a lot of things that North Carolina has information on their website, how to find out or get information about what's going on. Communications is going to be very spotty, but I would caution people, there's a lot of people missing. That's not unusual when communication is out. It doesn't mean that everybody, we've lost that many people. Unfortunately, they're going to find more fatalities as they go in these areas. But communications will be a huge piece of letting people make contact, let people know they're okay.
We've been hearing about the sort of the intersection of private insurance and then federal flood insurance. Do we have a solution in sight? And I think the property and casualty insurance market had been stabilizing until this event. Now all bets are off again.
Well, I think this will be, as we get into the next couple of weeks to the next month, it's going to be a huge issue of how many people did not have flood insurance that had flood damage and find out that their homeowner's policy will not cover that. This is a huge issue for the nation. We're seeing more and more extreme rain events that are flooding well outside of what's called the special flood hazard area. And that's really an insurance rate map. So a lot of people don't think they're in a flood zone, but in these extreme rainfall events, there are areas that have never seen water that are flooding. And because they don't have insurance, it's going to slow down recovery. It's also going to mean that the federal government is going to have to spend more money to help these communities recover. FEMA's programs will not make these folks whole. That's really, that emergency response. I think we're going to have Congress look at the needs in all of the states that have been hit, particularly HUD, Community Block Disaster Grant dollars, to help these communities rebuild, because the housing losses are going to be staggering. And without insurance to rebuild, it's going to be very difficult for folks to get back to where they were without significant federal assistance.
The whole idea of insurance is to spread the risk around. And we even see insurance companies, then they go and reinsure the insurance that they write. There's a way to do this in terms of an indemnity. Who needs to get involved if the private companies don't? It seems like it's something that Congress would have to do.
Well, that was the origin of the federal flood insurance program, because the insurance industry, after major floods back in the 60s, began to back out of that market and left it open. So the federal government stepped in. I think there are other ways to do this, perhaps looking at federal reinsurance when the reinsurance markets cannot be affordable. The other problem is, as I'm in Florida, our insurance rates are sky high, even if you can get insurance, is the market's reacting to the increasing number of disasters. And we have not quite found the balance between how and where we build to what's insurable risk, what the markets could afford. So if we're not going to change how and where we build, I'm afraid that the federal taxpayer is going to have to assume more of this burden.
Going to a different economy, and we're going to be learning more about that as we go. But clearly, we're learning that things can be done from remote locations. We're learning that technology can replace people even more than we thought.
We're not going back to the same economy. We're recovering, but to a different economy, and it'll be one that is more leveraged to technology. And I worry that that is going to make it even more difficult than it was for many workers.
In Silicon Valley, and my friends who work in technology know that what we did to the manufacturing workers, we are now going to do to the retail workers, the call center workers, the fast food workers, the truck drivers, and then even bookkeepers, accountants, insurance agents, lawyers, and on through the economy. So what happened to the manufacturing workers is a very clear sign.
And so we'll import Chinese-based CBDC technology. So it's going to be CBDC in a box provided to you by the People's Bank of China.
But every stock, every bond, every currency, every commodity, every piece of art, every private business, every piece of real estate will eventually be a token on a blockchain, an entry on a ledger, permanent and immutable. We will have truth instead of trust, and we will save over $7 trillion